Faceplants, failures, and mistakes. We all have them. Most of us spend a lot of energy trying to avoid them or hide them or just push through the funk they leave behind. But what if there's actually a better way to process what went wrong, one that actually frees you up instead of keeping you stuck? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Mark Graven, your host here on My Favorite Mistake. And our guest today is Dr. Melisa Buie. She's an operational excellence leader with deep experience at a number of semiconductor technology companies, working at the intersection of engineering and continuous improvement. She has a PhD in nuclear engineering from the University of Michigan. She's taught graduate engineering courses at San Jose State University, and she's the author of 2 books. Her first is Problem Solving for New Engineers, and her latest book she's a co-author of is Faceplant, Free Yourself from Failure's Funk. It's all about how we recover and move forward after things that go wrong. So as you can imagine, it's a perfect fit for this show. So Melisa, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Mark, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. You were kind enough to share a draft of the book. I loved it and was happy to endorse it. And I'm glad I didn't face plant or trip over all the F's in the
There's a
title.
lot of alliteration, definitely.
I love the alliteration, and I'm gonna say it once more. Faceplant, free yourself from failure's funk. Um, good thing. Yeah, I mean, we talk about helping friends. I'm not nitpicking. It's nitpicking, but in a friendly way. It could have been faceplant, free friends from failures. But what you have is a perfectly fine title, of course. So we'll talk about the book. We'll dig into this great topic together. But first off, I don't know if I should ask you what's your favorite face plant. I'm going to ask you the usual question: what's your favorite mistake?
Well, I'm going to say it's a face plant because I think it's a big one. My current favorite face plant is one that I didn't even realize was a mistake until like 10 years later, which is now. I published my first book while juggling a full-time job, teaching multiple classes at San Jose State, and raising my son as a single parent. So by the time the book came out, I was completely and totally exhausted. And I did absolutely nothing. So I didn't do marketing. I didn't do
Mm,
promotion. I
mhm,
basically walked away. So at the time, I told myself I'd earned the rest, right? Like
right.
I realized that I was tired.
Mhm,
I stopped. But what I really did was choose invisibility,
mhm,
not just for me, but
mhm.
more importantly, for the message in the book. And my first book, Problem Solving for New Engineers, was a tool that would have been so helpful for new engineers. And essentially, I let it go into obscurity for the most part. The realization about this and the impact of this didn't really hit me until I published my second book. And I remember sitting down to start the marketing and thinking, but I'm done. I can't do this again.
Mhm.
And then it clicked for me. Publishing isn't the finish line. It's actually the starting point.
Mhm.
This is where it all starts. And I'd already made this mistake once before. So the lesson for me was if I don't share this work,
Mhm.
I'm not just holding myself back. I'm withholding something that could be valuable and could help so many other people.
Yeah.
Now I think about visibility as a part of the responsibility of creating something meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back to your life as it stood at that time, I mean, would you say not doing more to promote the book was a mistake, or was it just was it just that's you didn't have the energy? You were saying you were tired. I mean, was that how it had to be at that point. Maybe the mistake was not revisiting the book later when you had more energy. Cause I mean, it sounds like a timeless message to come back to and share again.
Yeah, and so I actually think I don't want to make it sound like rest is not important. Rest is essential. And what happened is, so the mistake was it was just mistiming.
Mhm.
So I mistimed the rest. So I treated rest as the end of the process, right? Like I'm going to keep running, I'm going to keep going until the end. And instead of having rest be a part of the cycle. And what I needed was not to disappear, but to really create rest in a sustainable way to keep so that I could keep showing up after I recovered. So the lesson wasn't don't rest.
Okay. Right.
The lesson was don't disappear.
Yeah. I mean, our bodies, our brains tell us when we need rest, and we could try to not listen for a while is what I hear you saying, right? I
Right.
mean, I don't hear you, you're not using the word burnout. That's different than being tired, but is part of the lesson. Don't allow, easier said than done, right? I mean, you have a child, you have different things going on in life, but trying to just avoid the situation where you're so tired that you can't be visible is what I hear you saying.
And
Yeah.
the thing is, like, I didn't have to try to do everything, right? And I think that was one thing that um, I saw that was so overwhelming, right? Is okay, I've got to do everything. Like,
Mhm.
the thing is, you can do a few things and just do them consistently, and
Uh,
that would make a huge difference. So, even something as simple as, showing up once or twice a week on LinkedIn to
mhm.
talk about ideas, to keep the book alive, share what's going on. Those are the kinds of things. But it was just too big in my head at the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I disappeared.
Yeah. I think there's a lean management lesson that sounds familiar, perhaps to you and to many of the listeners who are into that same management approach. This way of thinking of being able to break down a problem, a big huge problem. I need to do more to market this book. How do we break that down into subsets of the problem? How do we focus on maybe the handful of high impact countermeasures that we can do? And that the businesses face that, right? I mean, the big huge problem might be our business is really struggling, or we're not growing revenue, or quality is really poor. I mean, those are also big, potentially overwhelming problems, right?
Right. They are. And we have to, if we don't want to let those problems overwhelm us, then showing up consistently, taking small actions is a really important way to make progress and to continually improve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, small steps done consistently is better than nothing. We still might see the
Exactly.
gap between what we could be doing if we had infinite time and infinite energy, but none of us do.
Right.
Mm. And I see you being, very visible. I see the LinkedIn algorithm is correct in showing me, when you post about the book and different stories. And I mean, what are your reflections on how that's going, and the exposure? Or I'm not prying into exact sales numbers for Faceplant, but I mean, how would you evaluate the experiments and the countermeasures so far with this book?
I actually think it's important to, I'm an engineer, right? So measurement and metrics are really important. And in terms of measuring how it's going, right? Well, you could look at I could look at things like likes or comments on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn post about it, or I could look at book sales, from the retailers. But, those are really indirect measures. They're not really things that tell us the impact that our work is having on people. So when we look at whether something's impactful, then what I look for are the reviews. I look for the comments that people write to me and say, or they pull me aside at a conference or a meeting and they say, you know what? This made such a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
I was at a book signing recently and somebody showed up the next day, called me and said, I was reading this last night and I remember something that happened to me when I was 6 years old.
Uh,
And it has lived with me the rest of my life. I had a message. The incident was the nun at her school had hung her picture down upside down. And up to that point, she'd thought she was this great artist, right? And the nun hung her picture upside down and she didn't say anything. And so she just took it to mean, oh, I'm not creative. And she lived with that the rest of her life. And this was a woman who
oh,
was
wow.
my age. And so these are things that like we realize and you see the impact when people tell you these stories or they write about these in reviews or in the comments on LinkedIn. These are things that really make a difference. Or when people share and repost. Those are the important metrics for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have thoughts of going back and either relaunching or republishing the problem solving book? Probably, you said it's what, 10 years old. It probably doesn't require too much of a refresh to put it back out there when you do have the energy and you can take lessons learned from the ongoing promotion of Faceplant back into that book.
Yeah. And one thing I've started doing is really looking at posting a lot more as I'm doing now, as I'm marketing this book, also taking the opportunity to do some marketing and promotion for the first book, because it's still really valuable tool for new engineers first getting into their early careers and learning how to solve problems in a way that's going to be consistent and reliable. Those are still really valuable techniques and tools from many years of doing problem solving in industry. So
Yeah.
yes, I am taking the opportunity to do that. And there's a possibility we may do a revamp on it.
Yeah.
Still in the thought stage right now.
Yeah. Well, and maybe part of the lesson learned is find the right time for that. Don't take on so much to the point where now you end up too tired.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause problem solving methodologies are for sure something you can learn, you can practice, you can get better at. That's pretty timeless. You might just need to add a chapter about like how do we use AI to help us with our problem solving? And my suggestion would be don't try to outsource the problem solving to AI.
Or make AI your partner, right?
Yes.
This is the thing. If we try to outsource anything to AI, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to lose our humanity. We're going to lose our creativity. But if AI is our partner, then it's less that we have to remember. We can use it as a like our best friend in the process. So it can be a really valuable way to enhance the
Yeah.
existing information that we have without turning everything over and letting it be the leader. We're still the leader. We just need a partner in,
Uh,
hey, well, what happens with this 1980s piece of equipment when this, oh, okay. Yeah, I can help troubleshoot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a thinking partner, you might not have an experienced human continuous improvement coach to look over your shoulder and, check my reasoning, check my logic here. Like if we're kind of sketching out attempts at root cause analysis. I mean, you can ask AI, like, does this causal analysis seem to follow a logical flow? Or, I mean, like, it may or may not have a good answer, but, even hopefully it would help you think through it better. And I'm still barely scratching the surface of trying to experiment with this myself. What does that partnership look like?
Yeah, I think this is a great time to experiment.
Mhm. Yeah.
And speaking
Yeah.
of experiments, so really figuring out, and AI is constantly changing. So luckily there's a lot of opportunity for more experimentation, but certainly we can jump in and just start trying things. And there's a lot of different AI products out there and a lot of different philosophies around it. So many,
Yeah.
many opportunities to experiment and try
Yeah.
things.
And let's bridge into the book. The title again is Faceplant: Free Yourself from Failure's Funk. It's fair to say anytime we do something new, we're experimenting or trying to be innovative, there's risk of a face plant, right?
Definitely. And actually, the more we studies have shown that the more we struggle in learning something, the more it sticks.
Oh,
And so,
well, I'm gonna say that's not true with differential equation. I don't know how I survived that far, but that did not stick. But okay.
I probably have
Okay,
to.
generally, I would agree. Well, you have PhD in nuclear engineering. I'm guessing differential diffie Q were not a problem for you. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
Outside of differential equations. Okay. Outside of
Sure. No,
differential equations.
but back to your real point that I hijacked. Sorry.
Yeah, but as we learn a new skill, as we learn new things, the more we get our hands dirty and struggle to learn it and then practice it, that's when we become really adept at it and we learn much more effectively.
Yeah. Is there an optimal level of struggle in your experience where too much struggle, thinking back to language in your book, that might feel like failure's funk and someone gives up, as opposed to continuing through to the point of, okay, now the struggle was worth it?
Yeah, so for example, if I'll talk about another one of my face plants in early in life was trying to learn another language. So if I would have jumped in to, oh, well, I'm an adult. I should just jump into Russian 3. And, at the university, that would be a really silly thing to do because there was no way I could avoid a face plant in that case, especially if I'd never had Russian 1 or 2. So
Mhm.
jumping in way at the deep end when you have no prior experience is setting yourself up for a really bad experience. But jumping in, trying small experiments, learning little bits at a time until you can get to the level where you're not stepping in the language we use in the book. You want to step outside your comfort zone, but you don't want to go so far that you're in your fear zone. And then it's impossible to learn because that's when your amygdala is going to kick in and you are going to be in trouble.
For sure. Yeah. We can't think or process things or do good problem solving when the amygdala takes over and we're in the fight, flight or freeze.
Or
Maybe well, yeah. It sounds like the lesson is don't do everything you can to avoid failure, but it's more, the book is more about processing and working through these quote unquote failures, right?
Yeah. And you know what? The more we try to avoid failures, the 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 less we're going to grow, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to grow as human beings, we're going to need to embrace struggle. We're going to need to embrace mistakes and errors because we're going to be constantly stepping outside of our comfort zone if we're trying to learn.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're focused in that area of our life when we're doing this, right? We're not in our comfort zone. We're definitely not comfortable,
Yeah.
but we're not too far out and we're struggling just enough so that we're learning. And in that case, we're still going to make mistakes, right? Michael Jordan, how many shots does he miss?
Yeah.
He talks about failure, right? And he's got like a 50% hit rate, or, if you look at his
Probably. Yeah.
total
I'd be surprised if it was, I'd be surprised if it, it might be slightly under 50%.
yeah. And so even some of the most amazing athletes, amazing people in the world, they still fail as much as they succeed. But we remember only the succeeds. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he did not win a championship every year.
Yeah.
If you want to look at that as an outcome. Because we can Google this, his career shooting percentage, get this, was 49.7%.
Yeah. So just under 50%.
Right. Now, I think, part is part of our reaction to failure a matter of expectations. Nowadays, Steph Curry and other top players in the NBA, they don't expect to hit every shot. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe part of being great is that, like, yeah, you take the shot because you think you can make it, but at some point they probably have to come to the recognition of nobody shoots 100%.
And you know what? We have certain areas of our life where we don't expect to hit every shot. If you look at growing up, we play on team sports and we know that we're going to win some and we're going to lose some.
Yeah.
We're not always going to be the state champions, but win some, lose some. But that same student who plays on the baseball team, who plays on the football team, who plays on the tennis team, right? Every sport, and may expect to lose some games there, put them in the classroom, and they bring home a B, and their parents ground them. Well, the message that's sending is failure is bad under these circumstances. And so we have expectations that we fail in certain areas, but we don't fail in other areas of our life. Or maybe the expectation is that we don't fail at all, ever. And we end up having a very, very small life when that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we wanted to do with Faceplant is provide a structure, provide a way that we could, independent of the area of our life, we could find that freedom that exists to learn and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to call out a mistake I made as soon as I said it. I was thinking, oh, faceplant, facepalm. I said Seth Curry, who is also an NBA player, the brother of the far more accomplished Steph Curry. So I will correct myself there for posterity. But I would love to talk more about, I think the inner struggle. Like a lot of times here in the podcast or in my work, we think about the organizational struggle or the organizational dynamics. So like, I might be fine with a well-structured improvement experiment not panning out the way I thought. And I could say, well, we learned something and we're going to iterate and we're going to move on. You better hope your boss agrees with that mindset though, right?
Right.
If the boss punishes you instead of a parent.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And, that's another place where we see that it's not safe to fail. It's in our workplace. And many times we inadvertently create cultures where failure is not okay, rather than creating cultures where curiosity and experimentation are the standard. And so if we've got a workplace like that, what we're doing is we're shutting people down, and we're going to limit innovation. We're going to limit creativity and curiosity because people will move into protection mode, and they are not going to take any chances. They're not going to risk getting called out or a bad performance review by taking a
Mhm.
chance. So if we essentially punish people for failing, that's what we're doing.
People are going to not take any risks.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like organizational language before we come back to like, the inner struggle or things we can do in everyday life. I think we're aligned when, you say there could be some issues with the common platitudes like fail fast or fail forward. Like why do some of those motivational slogans fall flat?
Part of the reason they fall flat is because there's no substance to it, right? There's nothing behind it to back it up that acknowledges what's so for us. When we fail, it doesn't matter where we fail, it doesn't feel good. And where is that acknowledged in fail fast or fail forward? There's no acknowledgement of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't acknowledge the whole human experience around failure, then that's where we start. That's where we start falling short, and things start falling flat. And when we don't prioritize the importance of spending time really looking at and reflecting on what happened and separating out what's the facts from our story about it, what we tell ourselves about it. We collapse those very, very often, and that's how it lives for us. That's how the failure lives. So
Yeah.
for my situation, right? It was when I went through divorce. Well, the message I told myself was the reason this happened is because I'm not lovable. No,
Yeah.
separate it out. So the truth is that our relationship didn't last. That's the
Mhm.
truth. Okay, yes, it failed. But it's important that we separate these things out and get really clear about the facts, and then get really clear what our story is, what our emotions are, because that's where all the hard stuff is. And if
Yeah.
we spend time
Yeah.
in reflection, getting clear on all of that, we can then get to the other side where we can be curious and really start exploring what else is out there. That's where the freedom is, on the other side of that reflection.
Because I've been in or around situations where a coworker made a mistake and they didn't face a punitive response from anyone in the organization. But to your point, people still feel bad. The inner struggle about processing the mistake or the failure that came from it can still be a real barrier
Mhm.
and I remember, once trying to jump a little too quickly into root cause analysis mode. And the person I was working with, thankfully said basically like, hey, maybe later today. Like they just wanted a little time to kind of just process and get over feeling bad about it, or at least let the amygdala calm down. And we
Right.
did that later in the day. I've been taught, like, do problem solving when the problem is fresh, but later that day it was certainly timely enough where I think, if I hadn't been a little more attuned, to the situation, I might have pressed on and pressed through, and he might have begrudgingly gone through the root cause analysis, but we might not have progressed as much as I think we did later on.
Right. Because if our amygdala is triggered, right, we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And when that happens, our prefrontal cortex is not engaged. It's not working at full capacity. And so trying to troubleshoot or problem solve during that time is going to be really difficult because you're not getting the full person. They're not
Sure.
fully available. And so giving them time to reflect on what happened is a really valuable use of time for them, and they can calm down and get to a place where they can start talking about it effectively and really engage in problem solving.
Yeah. So I think we have time to cover two other things. One is, I think some of the inner reactions to failure. You call them the autopilot responses to failure. The machine, the magician, the statue, and the satellite. Can you kind of walk through those briefly, and which one tends to show up most for you?
So these nicknames or these personas that you've just described are essentially nicknames for fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so for me, my immediate go to is to freeze. I will, and it's like, I don't know what to do. And my brain shuts down. I don't know what, I can't respond. I can't think. I can't, which is really difficult when you're on stage or something.
Yeah. That's
And
the stat here.
right. So
Yeah.
it's that shows up the most for me. But what we've done, we tried to make it a little more fun. So we took these 4 basic responses from the amygdala and gave them nicknames, and then talked about what are typical responses. And one of the things that we do is we call the amygdala and these responses conspirators. So they're out to get us. And so we're just trying to make it fun and lighten it up a little bit so that we don't want it to be so serious because this is a really serious topic.
It is. And, I'm guessing part of the advice or the countermeasure, you can't say, okay, well, I tend to freeze, so don't freeze, like that kind of pressure, not effective, right?
It really doesn't work. It really doesn't work. But what you can do is spend time going through this time of reflection and then getting to the other side. And the more you practice doing this cycle of, it's essentially like a PDCA cycle, but the more you practice this cycle, spending time in reflection, getting curious, and then engaging in other action, doing that over and over, what you do is you allow your amygdala to calm down. And the more you train it, I don't need to react so defensively every time I make a mistake here because I'm not going to get fired. We're going to talk about it and we're going to figure out what happened in this particular case, right? So the more we practice, the more we can get to that place of freedom on the other side. and the faster we can get at it. And now, with every new situation, it's probably going to take some time to get through it
Mhm.
to once you have a realization, oh, yeah, this one's different, but we just keep going forward. And then the more we bring that sense of curiosity and mindset of experimentation to the problem, then we bring that a faster pace to it because it's not so heavy. It's not so serious.
Yeah.
Oh, and regularly now, I'm just like, oh, well, that was a face plant. Okay. And move on. Whereas before, I'd be like, oh, that's going to be so serious. What am I going to do? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I was just going to say, thankfully, I think, you being on the podcast didn't create a statue response. Your prefrontal cortex is firing well, I think, here, Melissa.
Well, good.
Maybe one other thing to cover, a lot of organizations use, what are, often called postmortems after an issue, after a project, software development, and in addition to other industries. Sometimes, people use terms like, after action review. But I think, you bring up this really interesting practice of a pre-mortem. And so I was curious, for one, just kind of talk us through that concept and why we're better off doing pre-mortems. And then, let's talk about how we can use that as individuals.
Yeah. So I think the pre-mortem is a really, really valuable tool for us as individuals and for organizations. Because when you're starting a project, if you go into it looking at what could go wrong and what the risks are ahead of time, it's a really valuable tool for, oh, hey, you know what? We can avoid that situation. And then you just keep revisiting it. Oh, what would have happened if we did this? So you keep revisiting that tool along the way and adding to it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do, we adapt for the individual is what we call an expectation disconnect. And it's really, oh, I'm having Thanksgiving dinner with my in-laws next week. There's there's a lot of opportunities for face plants there. Well, if I
Yeah.
look at what my expectations are going into it and make sure that that those are grounded in reality, I can then try to avoid as many face plants as possible in
Yeah.
that scenario. So it's a really great tool for looking ahead
Hmm.
to figure out what the potential risks are and what might go wrong, and then reining in or making plans for how you might behave in a different way and ground your expectations so that you don't have expectation that it's going to be a love fest.
Yeah. Don't have unrealistic expectations. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, that, to me, I love that idea of, being proactive in engineering and continuous improvement speak. I mean, this is an acronym could only be developed by engineers or statisticians. FMEA, failure mode effects analysis. Like, that is a very engineering thing to do, of thinking through, like, literally what could go wrong with this product, what could go wrong with this process, how likely is it? I write a little introduction, to this concept in practice, in my book, The Mistakes That Make Us, of, like, how likely is it? What's the severity if it happens? And what's the detectability
Right.
of the problem? So, like, you might think about, like, the odds that I steer the conversation into an uncomfortable or bad direction that leads to a Thanksgiving dinner argument, like the risk is non-zero, but the severity, depending on the people involved, I'm just using a general scenario here. The severity could be high. The detectability might be of like, oh, well, if you start to go there, somebody elbows you or kicks you under the table, or you catch yourself of like, okay, no. Okay. Let's go back to talking about football.
Right. Or in my house, that would be the topic that gets everybody in trouble. So we'll avoid football.
Sure. It's very individual and situational, but, to me, maybe it's just so ingrained. I've had some people push back on, this FMEA or the concept of a pre-mortem of like, well, that's being negative. Don't plan for problems. Don't plan for failure. I'm like, well, if we want to pretend like everything's going to go perfectly, my engineer brain says the problems, the failures, the face plants are going to be worse. But there are some people that have that mindset. I've run across it. Have you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I've encountered is particularly with FMEAs and trying to lead those sessions, development sessions, is that people get so hung up on the terminology and, like, oh, what's a mode? What's an effect? And the thing is,
Right.
it really doesn't matter. Keep the end goal in mind. Keep the end goal in mind. What are we trying to accomplish here? Just throw spaghetti on the wall. We'll figure out all that stuff later. Let's not get bogged down in what's a mode and what's an effect and all of that. Let's look at how can this thing fail? What can happen? Let's get it out there. And
Yes.
then we can go back and look at which fits in which column. And also, in terms of measuring those things, right? That's a really tricky thing too, right? Like, oh, what's a 7 and what's an 8? Go to a 1 and a 2. Go to a 1 and a 2. Go to a 1, 2, 3. But make it so that it's really simple when you're getting started. And so that if you're arguing about things, you're missing the whole point of the exercise.
Yeah. It's about being, proactive and thinking things through and thinking about the actions that we can take to prevent a face plant.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think about language. Post-mortem is an interesting phrase because I think it means after death. Right. I mean, do a post-mortem on a project. Like, it doesn't mean the project is dead. I mean, maybe the project is over. I mean, after action review has different roots, but maybe like, I don't know, you can call it a pre-action review or a before action review. And, it's a PAR or a BAR, or, people love creating acronyms for these things. But I mean, I think we're on the same page. The more important thing is to try to be proactive, prevent face plants, but learn how to be, I don't know if resilient is the right word, but, prevent face plants, but recognize, mistakes, failures, face plants still happen.
They
The
do.
way we react is key.
Yeah.
I'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah. So it's really important to just remember face plants are going to happen. Failures, mistakes, errors. The important thing is to spend time in reflection and learn and grow from it. And then you're all good.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for being a guest here today. Again,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Melisa Buie has been our guest today. The first book, you have a new engineer in your life or about to be new engineer graduating this year. Check out Problem Solving for New Engineers. And then the latest book, again, is Faceplant, Free Yourself from Failure's Funk. Melissa, this has been great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Not a faceplant on your part, not at all.